All right, really quickly, this isn't going to be a spoiler video for the series. I am on the 10th book of 10 in Malazan Book of the Fallen on my first read, and I've absolutely adored it. I've loved it. Now, it hasn't always been a smooth ride to the end of this series. Even though I was almost always very high on the series, there were spots that were a little bumpy for me, or certain kind of ways that the story was put together, that sometimes it can be a little bit of a struggle for some of those little moments. So I've highlighted some things here that I think some might find tricky. It doesn't mean it's not worth going through the series, and I also am not meaning it's a negative. I'm just meaning this is the kind of thing you would be getting into when you get into it. And if it's something that you would get into, or it sounds good, you're not scared of these roadblocks, then go for it, because it was totally worth it. It was totally awesome, but I really can't tell who it would be necessarily for. Now, the first thing has to do with the complexity of this series. A lot of people will go, when they're talking about Malazan, they'll say it doesn't hold your hand, right? And that can come off a number of ways. That can come off as being very like elitist or gatekeeping about the series that we love and I love, because it kind of also implies that this doesn't hold your hand, but your baby series just holds your hand and it has nothing deep to offer, and da 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 da. That is not how I would put that. Now, I do agree that in a lot of ways it doesn't hold your hand, but that is not to disparage these other series, which I love. These other series, I'm along with you guys. But what it means is it is complex. It does juggle a ton of plot lines, and there is a massive cast of characters. In the first book, you're on a continent and you have a big cast of characters, and when you finally are getting to know them by the end of the book, the second book is in a totally different continent, and then you get to know them, and then by the time you get back to in the third book to some of these people from the first book, you're like, oh shoot, what happened with them? And then it's even worse in the fourth book when you go back to the people from the second book. So when we say it doesn't hold your hand, in a lot of ways, it's like slapping your hand away. You have to really pay attention to that stuff. And there are plot lines that will start, and then sometimes multiple books will go by before you get back to them. And for a lot of people, that absolutely will be a negative. And I totally understand that. There are, if every series I read was as deep as Malazan and like tricky, I don't know if I would be I loved this, but sometimes you just want to go through things that have deep themes and deep things to think about, but you're not like, it's not such a chore. Like, you really have to dig out your pick and shovel sometimes to really grasp some of the things that are going on. And I don't think you have to be extra smart. You just have to be willing to slow down with this series, with the complexity, with the large cast, the plot lines, the world building. And there are moments in this series throughout, no matter where you are in your, I think even the most keen readers of this, I don't know if that's the term, but even the best readers of this series, I'm sure, have moments where they're like, who was this again? And there are resources out there for fixing some of that stuff. There's a great PowerPoint if you want to really go in depth. There's this Tor read-along that they go through like each of the scenes and give a little summary of each scene and some of the things. It kind of directs your eye I know there's a wiki. I've tried to stay away from that as much as I can for each of these. And I've noticed on the wiki, like you can generally go, if you looked up a character, it will break it down by book. So in Gardens of the Moon, if they're mentioned, it'll have a little blurb. And it usually is pretty good at keeping away from some of the spoilers. I've had to do that for some people here and there. So the complexity can be a little bit of a roadblock. You really have to go into it knowing that this is going to be a journey. Okay? And some things that are going to connect with other people might not connect with you, but you might connect with something that other people don't connect with. There are plenty of things. And I will say on that note that a lot of people will say you got to at least read the first 3 books to know if it's for you. And I also kind of agree with that. But as far as the complexity and feeling like, should I know more? There's always a little bit of that where you know what's going on. Like you won't be swimming in the sea of like, what the heck is going on? Like you always have an idea of what's going on, but some of the details between each character will kind of leave you in the dust a little bit unless you're paying attention. But it's not so obtuse that you can't. Anyway, I better move on. But I was saying, now that I'm in the Crippled God, it does feel like he's really reminding me of some of these things that I might have forgotten. So I think he's doing a good job of pulling it all in. Anyway, the next thing, number 2, is this, I think it's called in media res storytelling, where he just drops you into a conflict. And he does this in the first book, where he kind of drops you into this massive siege, and you are there looking around, kind of trying to pick up the pieces of what's going on. And you won't know really all the details of that until several books in, even. So when you're thinking, I don't really understand the moving parts in this, I only understand kind of who was involved with it, that's the way it's meant to be, because he will add to your knowledge and remind you later in a number of these things. But for some of them, it's not even really the conflict that's the thing. It's about these people that you're supposed to be, you know, it's really a study of these people. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but he loves doing this, and it can be a little jarring for some people. It's not like you start with a boy who's a shepherd or a boy who's a farmer, and he grows up to be this, and then he goes on a journey and does this, and then you get your climax, and then this. It's about a whole bunch of people, and they all have their own little arcs, and some people's arc finishes in the second book, and some people's extends. It's about people. And the story of our history as well is that, even though people, that names change and kingdoms change, the story just goes on. So this is just one point of this story of this vast, this world that has seen millennia, hundreds of thousands of years of history. I'll say that. And this is just one point, but it does allude to these other points, and really it's trying to expand your scope, that it's not necessarily all about these people at this moment, but a much grander thing. So if you're wanting something epic in scope, I can't think of anything that does it more than this, and in depth. If you're wanting something where you can really dig into some of the thematic values and principles and things, I'll talk about that in a sec. But it really is just so massive in that way, and it will drop you into all these conflicts that you don't know all the details of kind of who's who. Where are we? Number 3 is just the length of this series. The books just get bigger and bigger. Here are the first 5 books down here, and then if move my head. Here are the next 4. Substantially bigger. All of those are longer than 1,000 pages. These are big books. These are big books, and that can be certainly a hurdle. The next one would maybe be the dark themes. And there's violence, often sexual violence. And even though it is usually not gratuitous about the sexual violence, especially, and about several things, it is implied that these things have happened to people. And there are very heavy things that happen to the people that it makes your heart and your gut really sink. But it's not reveling in this. I don't look for books that just would bring me down, right? And this series doesn't bring me down. But it does explore dark things in order to bring out lightness. I find an immensity of hope, and there's joy at times, and goodness, and relationships that really you feel like you're a part of their bond because you're just witnessing this beautiful thing. But it is often in the midst of really tragic, awful stuff. Number 5, I guess, is just the amount of philosophical and existential dialogues that there are in this. It's everywhere. If you don't want to chew on or listen to characters kind of chew on moments, you know what I mean? Like sometimes people they'll dialogue in every book, but sometimes you will have big, long moments of a character's thought, and you will really get invested in some of these dialogues that are both internal and with other people. They can be complex. They can be heavy. They often repeat from something someone's going through here. Within one book, you'll have it kind of echoed in other things going on at a larger scale, at a racial scale, at a community scale, at a personal scale. And it's very special in that way. Like I could read these books over and over and get more information in this regard than almost anything I can think about. And for that reason, it can be slow at times if you're not really looking for that. Now, I was just gobbling it all up. Like it's my favorite aspect of these books. I love when the plot stops and we can sit with these characters. But I totally understand where that wouldn't be for everyone. So just so you know, if you're going to go into it, you're going to sit with characters often. Even though it's a massive cast and you're not always spending tons of time with each of them, you know, there will be down moments or slow moments, I guess you could say, slow. And you just got to be ready for that. Number 6, it's not always clear if there's not always a great distinction between good versus evil. It's very murky at times, and it really does this on purpose, and it does address this within the characters. They bring that sort of stuff up, and even by about book 3, I was still thinking, like, who am I rooting against, and who am I really rooting for? Like you're kind of just watching things happen. And you definitely have things you don't like and have things you like, but it's not always so clear. It can be ambiguous. It can have a lot of gray area. The last thing that I'll mention is I did notice the profanity. So here's how it goes. I looked up on a thing called Search of the Fallen, where you could look up keywords, And as I was going through the books, for the first 4 books, you don't get an F word, right? A schoolyard. The one that rhymes with duck, you don't get it. And even the S word that rhymes with pit, I guess, you get like 1 in the second book, a few in the next, and 1 in the next. But for the F word, you don't get it for the first 4 books. And I know that a lot of people, it wouldn't bother them either way. I know for me, I don't love it. When I'm looking at a new book, if I look and you see it just kind of in scanning, if it's just everywhere, it does turn me off from the book a little bit. And I know other people are kind of the same way. So in the first few books, if that sort of thing bothers you, the first few books, you're kind of in the clear. And then in the 5th book, you get your first F word. I'll keep saying that. And it's kind of like, holy smokes, it's like Ron Weasley finally swore at someone with the F word in book 5. Like, it just kind of throws you off. And then in the next one, you get 2. So it's like he cracked open the not the floodgates, but it's cracking it open a little bit in the 5th book. 6th book, you get 2. Next, you get 8. In the 8th book, you get 14, and then 44, and then 66. And it's the same sort of trajectory with Profanity generally in the series, where it does ramp up. So if that would really bother you, then that's something maybe to know that it does ramp up near the end of the series. Anyway, so I still love the series. It really has blown me away on a number of fronts. I can't wait to do more videos when I'm done the main series, Book of the Fallen, and start showcasing some of the characters. I think that would be fun, and showcasing some of the great themes and stuff that I took out of it, because there are a lot of things. And then it's just going to be so fun on the reread as well. But these are some of the things that I thought would be roadblocks. They were for me a little bit. Others not so much, but yeah, it is a big commitment to get into it. And not only is it a big commitment in terms of just the length of it, it does demand your attention more than a lot of books I've ever read. I've never had to really sit down and glue myself to the page, often rereading paragraphs to really gather what is being put into these amazing pages. It really is a masterpiece of a series. Even if I and other people have certain gripes with it, or things that they wish would have happened with it, or the way things were conveyed, or content and things like that, it really is something amazing. So I'll talk to you guys on the next one, whenever that's gonna be.